Hey everyone, this is Nick from NXT Plants. Today I'm going to be going through and pulling out the plants that I'm struggling with, identifying what the issue is and what I can do going forward to make things better. Start off with, here we have a prop of my Pappy RA5 Self. I think this is the third leaf this prop has put out. The two before it crisped to nothing, and it's been doing, the Anthurium thing where it gets that really dehydrated crisping from the edge or sometimes the tip. And it's hard to answer because it hasn't been a pest or anything, and the mother plant that it came from did a similar thing when it was first getting settled into my conditions. So part of me thinks it's just what this plant does. However, one of the things I did was pull it out of the super high humidity of the bins and move it to the tent, and that has managed to preserve this leaf. So I think what I was having an issue with was the water droplets on the leaves, I think transpiring, causes it to shed its cell layers. You guys know what I'm talking about. Especially if you have a white variegated plant, if you leave the water on it, it'll very quickly lift those cells. It was doing that to the emergent leaves, and I think that's what's been plaguing this plant. So in a little bit better airflow, I'm hoping that with the next leaf it'll fully hold on to it and I won't have any of this edge crisping. I figure since I had easy access to this one, I wanted to show the difference between a leaf getting fertilizer and a leaf not getting fertilizer. It shows this is not an emergent leaf. It's actually held this for quite a long time, and the next leaf is already in the process of coming out. This was one that I was previously not doing so well with. Since uppotting it to this good breathable pot, it's had a much better time and has been sizing. I should say this is a Red Beauty crossed with a Magnificum. I love the color. I'm so excited to see this thing flower. It looks like it might do it with the next leaf. Here is my F1 LG Pap. This is its most recent leaf. It is looking really rough because I gave it a repot, not into this pot, but I was experimenting with a new pot setup, and what ended up happening is it wasn't sufficiently wicking, so the plant dried out really badly. You can see the ringing, it dehydrated pretty bad. Since I moved it into this, it's obviously doing fine and has rehydrated itself. Thankfully I caught it before the roots went bad. So and the way I noticed was the leaf was very dehydrated. And like I said, thankfully it has pumped itself back up, because it would have been really sad. It's also working on inflow, so we'll see if the inflow progresses normally or if the plant isn't going to work with that. But yeah, the big thing is I was keeping a very close eye on it after the repot, and since I was trying a new setup, and not every experiment works, so glad I caught it before too much harm was done with it. And I mean, if you're going to do experiments, Paps are a pretty good one to experiment with just because of how hardy they are. Here is another plant that there's a really easy fix to prevent this ugly crisping around the edges, and that is to not let it dry out repeatedly. It's almost dry again. This plant I've just been severely neglecting. You're having the pitting like this around the edges. I would definitely make sure you're staying on top of the watering. This is, I don't know if I said again, this is a Quirmalens. Big thing with a lot of these, especially the velvet ones, is they really don't want to dry out, and if they do dry out, they will make you suffer with cosmetic damage. I don't know if I'm going to do any better going forward. I've been busy and haven't been as on top of the watering as I should be, but that's sometimes just how it is, and I'm not too upset that this one slipped through the cracks. But I don't know. I'll try and stay more on top of it, I guess. Maybe. I think whatever, I'm not going to say anymore. Over it. Here we've got this big one-leafed Regal. It failed putting out this leaf, which is why I want to talk about it. The reason it failed putting out the leaf is it was in a self-watering pot, and the indicator had stuck, and so I didn't notice that it ran dry while it was emerging. So it did that funny thing where the leaf stunts at that emergent size and just never grows past that. So to make sure that didn't happen this time around, I gave it a big up pot, and it is now working on the next leaf. So I'm really looking forward to that. And obviously if it does the same thing or it doesn't emerge properly, I know I have something else I need to sort out. But I don't know, the plant has rooted really well, very solidly in this pot, so I'm hopeful that the new leaf will come out in pretty good shape. So yeah, that's another thing, where if the plant is drying out and it tries to do an emergent, it probably won't size properly. It can also be a good sign, if the plant didn't dry out, it can also be a sign that there's something wrong with the root system, because I've also noticed that if a plant's root system is sort of collapsed or, rotted very badly, it will sort of fail to push the emergent properly and it'll stay stunted. Here is another one that has been a bit of a struggle. It declined this. Oh, sorry. This is my NSE Dressleri. So this one has declined a little bit since the repot, but this is its first leaf after. So we didn't lose any size really, thankfully. Didn't gain much, but still in a pretty solid spot. And I gave it a repot to add in this collar. It was before I got the size up on these square pots, and I wasn't quite ready to move this into something even bigger. So I added the collar. There's some slits for where there used to be leaves, but after the repot, it dropped all but one of its leaves. And they sometimes just do that so that they have the energy to shoot lots of roots. Thankfully the plant didn't experience really any rot from the repot. It just took it a long time to get back to a spot where it wants to grow, and that is just something that these Dressleri can do. You can see it's got a very pretty color. This leaf isn't quite hard yet. It's a nice plant. I'm hopeful that I'll get a few more leaves now that it's been repotted, but I'm probably going to repot it again, most likely in spring, and that's just to give it a bigger pot size so that I can hopefully start pushing some flowers out of it. Gotta respect the Dressleri. Sometimes they can be very, very difficult. So not necessarily difficult. Very reactive. They don't like to be messed with. Oh, and another thing, if you're growing Dressleri and you're struggling with the color, they want very little light. I noticed a huge difference when I moved it way back into the shadows. So it's literally behind a plant on the shelf back here. You can see the shelf, it lives behind all those plants, and the grow lights are positioned in front right there. So it gets very little light, and it seems to, have been doing a good job getting a nice color on the plant. So definitely play around with really dropping the light on these Dressleri. Here's a good one that's doing looking a little bit rough. It's had better days. I mean, not really. I only imported it recently. I attempted to pollinate its inflow with BVEP. It didn't take, so that just fell right out. This is the most recent leaf. It failed, and that was just because it was putting it out after being potted up, and that's just part of what happens when you repot. And Anthurium is sometimes, the leaf it's working on won't be so pretty because it doesn't have the root system, or it's choosing to focus its energy on building the root system. Nothing really to worry about here. It's very solidly in the planter. I can see lots of roots on the surface. If I couldn't see those things and it felt loose, I would worry about root rot given the most recent leaf, but lower leaves aren't yellowing. They're nice and turgid. And again, the plant is firmly in the pot. So I think what this thing needs is just some good light and a couple months to put out some fresh leaves, and then, prune off the old ugly ones, and I think it would be in a really good spot. I think that wraps up the tent. I'm pretty sure everything else in here is doing really well. There hasn't really been, oh God, I'm gonna jinx this. Last time I did this, I had problems immediately the next day. I don't have much more to talk about, and here's what I'm gonna say. Oh, I gotta show you guys this ace before I walk away. I just wanted to show you. Look at this. Look at this leaf. This isn't even the max color. Look at this plant, how crazy that is. Such a good plant. And with this leaf came a caterpillar. So that is really exciting. So that's now, oh gosh, I'm just obsessed with the leaf. This isn't a plant that I'm struggling with. This is my red spider. I opened the bin to pull out a different plant, and this is my first leaf that's starting to go peltate, and you can see the cup shape. So I figured I would show it because that is very, very exciting. I don't know how well the color is coming across on camera, but yeah, there is that little new leaf. Okay, the whole reason I wanted to make this video was my voodoo. I impromptu pulled it out of the pot because I was noticing some more issues with rot, so I wanted to pull it out and make sure that I wasn't getting rot into the stem. Looks like I need to wash this a little bit more thoroughly and probably give it a Fizan soak. This plant has been a nightmare. Lost all of its leaves because of a repot, and it looks to have developed like a case of root rot on a lot of its roots, so I'm just hoping I can soak this and keep alive the growth point, because that is still alive. So BRB. Got it all cleaned up. And it looks like this is what I have left. See a little growth point. Oh, I gotta hide my face. Hopefully see the little growth point right there. One leaf, some healthy root up high, and a little bit of good root growth down below. This is so sad. So I'm gonna try and get this guy soaking in Fizan. Okay, got my dilute Fizan, and I'm gonna just drop that guy right in. I often get asked what size to begin fertilizing and uppotting seedlings. I have a few right here in this pot right now. I moved them in here because they were getting to the point where they'd run out of energy from the seed, so that's when they need to start being supplemented. I didn't want to individually pot them because when I am growing out, this is like a pot of mutated Fort Sherman self. So, I'm not sure which ones I'm going to keep long term or if they will even hold the mutations. So this one is just very pebbly. This one has blister, and I think this one is also blister. So I've just been holding on to them to see how the traits mature and grow in. And since they were yellowing, if you're not fertilizing and they're yellowing, that means they are ready to begin being fertilized. If you are fertilizing and they're yellowing, especially if they're seedlings, you could be giving it nutrient lockout and frying them. So that's when you'd want to eliminate the fertilizer. Probably repot them and see if that doesn't solve your issue. Yeah, cute little guys. I would show you the mutations, but it's barely visible to the eye at this size, so it certainly won't be picked up by the camera. This one isn't struggling, but it's exhibiting. Sorry, let me put it this way. This plant isn't struggling, but it is asking for something. You see three leaves in a row, same size, roots busting out the top, roots into the reservoir. This plant is getting to the point where it's pretty desperate for an up pot, and the way it's making that abundantly clear is, the lack of size. Obviously it was going to cataphyll, so it's going to do pretty much a rosette before the cataphyll, as they like to do, but the lack of sizing since the switch to cataphyll is telling me that this plant needs an up pot. So probably going to do that fairly shortly. And obviously if you don't up pot and you're trying to size the plant, it can lead to issues because you have to prune the roots pretty heavily. This one isn't on my rehab list, but it's going to be as soon as I up pot it because it's due for one. So I'll immortalize it on here in case it dies back, because this is another Dressleri. So gotta give her an up pot. It's got a bunch of stem up and out of the pot, so it's definitely ready for a bit of an up pot. Here we have the King of Spades from the video I did where I was rescuing the King of Spades. Bought it off the marketplace. It was a rehab. It has great root growth around the edges. Up on the top, I don't know how well that's going to show, but lots of really good new root growth. The growth point that I revealed is increasing in size. Means it's going to be starting a new leaf soon. So this plant is definitely at the point where I should be figuring out a long-term home for it, because before too long the roots are going to take over this like 32-ounce no drainage. So before that happens, I really should give it some sort of a net pot so it can hold a larger reservoir. Anyways, this thing went in here. If you didn't watch the video, I chopped all its roots off so it was just bare stem like that, and I just sunk it in here. And I've got lots and lots of roots around the edge. This one was so sad. I can't remember if I shared on YouTube that it almost died. I think I had like a note and a half left before I caught the root rot. It did that thing where it rots stem out, so the roots were all looking fine. Because I was like, oh, it kind of looks like it's starting to get root rot, but I was digging and looking, the roots were happy and healthy. But the rot was coming from the stem out, which is always so much fun to find. But as you can see, rough leaf, it's kind of moldy, but here in the center it has shot a new leaf, so I can see a little bit of root poking out the bottom. So I'm just so happy that I caught it in time, and the plant is very hardy and vigorous, and it has bounced back remarkably. Thank goodness. Yeah, if you ever If your plant, I mean, everyone says this, if your plant ever starts rapidly yellowing leaves, you check for rot. I always say this, and then I act surprised when a plant is yellowing its leaves and I check and it has root rot. So yeah, sometimes it's just a fact of life, and you gotta hope you catch them in time. Here is another one that is always being crazy. I really don't understand. It alternates like runty leaf, sort of normal leaf, and by normal leaf I mean this kind of leaf. I think I really just need to give it much lower light, but also it's just not sizing that well. This is an Ace of Spades X Cunha lens. Although it's very interesting, so don't get me wrong, it's fun to grow. And it grows fast. Same speed as the completely normal ones. I think the next thing I want to do is acclimate this to the tent and move it to a dark corner to see if that changes how the leaves come in. I'm very curious why they stunt. And before you ask, it's not nutrient lockout. I should try tree fern, because right now it's always been in pon. I really should try tree fern. That might be the thing that finally fixes this. So I probably won't repot it right away, but I think I'm going to check if lower light does anything first. But I really should switch it. I should just switch it to tree fern, because that could very well be what this is. Don't ask me, some plants just prefer the tree fern to the pon. Here we have what remains of my Clitomioides mother plant. So I cut the vine up and propped it, and what was left behind is this. It's in a bit of a rough shape, simply because of how root bound this plant is, but that's the same reason I don't touch it. I just leave it in this pot. It's shooting a new growth point. I chopped it back to this butt because I was starting to get a bit of a bald vine for where the older growth had dropped off. So yeah, it looks like I'm getting a couple growth points from this. Hopefully they put out some nice big leaves before long. Yeah, no, it's not really a rehab. I just figured I would include it since it's looking a little bit mangy and show, like, you know, sometimes you just gotta cut, especially these vining plants, sometimes you have to cut them back to their stump and let them just regrow so that you get a cute little compact plant again. This thing was very much a rehab, and then out of nowhere, I haven't been paying attention, it shot this huge leaf. This is a little pallitiflorum. Here I have two plants where the fix is the exact same thing, and I just need to get them into pots that have better ventilation. In my experience, that makes the plants grow a lot faster, and these are both really tiny plants that are struggling. This is my, variegated Alocasia bambino. So this is the little pink one. And this is my TC Delta Force. It's finally working on a second leaf. This has been just a total nightmare. I thought I was gonna lose it. Then I moved it to 100% fluval as just sort of my last resort. Same with this thing. And both of them have been doing really, really well since that move. And that was really funny because, like, I used to do quite a bit of stuff with the straight fluval, but then I'd started diluting it and I had better results with that. But sometimes I swear it must just be these little TC plants. They just love the fluval more than anything. Here's another one that's like not a rehab plant, but I am doing something with it to try to bring out the best in it. This is my variegated little plant I made. It's a pap crossed with a Best AF. It does this beautiful mint, white to mint variegation. I moved it into higher light to try to bring out the mint. You know, the mint variegation can sometimes darken down if it's not getting super high light. And what's nice about this plant is in the higher light, it blushes to a nice pink color. This one's really exciting. The other great thing about it is it's matched the non-variegated plants leaf for leaf. A little bit smaller, obviously, but that's to be expected when you have variegation on the leaves. Here's one of my keepers from that same cross so you compare the size. This is another one that recently gave an up pot, and that's because it was in a little no drainage seedling cup that I keep them in often to slow down and standardize their growth. I think I decided to keep and grow this one out, so I'm excited to see, you know, the traits it takes on. Cute little plant. And again, this is just one of those ones where when they hit, you know, that fourth leaf, they really start wanting that fertilizer. So, you know, if your seedlings are starting to look real mangy around there and you haven't otherwise changed anything, it could be they're ready for some ferts. And if you're going to start fertilizing them, some plants will react pretty negatively to that. Others obviously won't, but it can take sometimes a leaf or two for the plants to acclimate to the higher fertilizer. If you're noticing damage to the roots, then you really have a problem. And obviously that needs to be addressed before you can go back to heavily fertilizing a plant. And if you're, like I said, if you're just starting out, you might want to ease the plants into a full strength nutrient solution, and you can just dilute it with, filtered water. Here we have an LGF2 pap seedling. It is absolutely mutant as all hell. Very healthy, great root system, good stem. And I don't know why it's doing this. It's now 3rd leaf in a row this way. And it's been ever since it dropped its growth point and shot a new one from, the little seedling area down low. I would really like to get this thing potted up to see if it's potentially something to do with, maybe a nutrient buildup or whatever in the substrate. However, haven't gotten around to it, and I am enjoying, obviously, the completely messed up leaves. At a certain point, these become the most fun. This is also like an absolutely insane runt. This plant is my first pap, so it's tiny compared to what it should be. Really cool, crumply leaves. If this was my personal plant and I was trying to make it look good, number one thing I'd be doing is giving it a repot, making sure it's in some fresh substrate. I would also be treating for both kinds of pests if that wasn't something you're already doing, and if it was, I would give it another treatment. It's been treated repeatedly to make sure it's not a pest issue. It doesn't seem to be fungal or bacterial, and I haven't noticed any nearby plants experiencing any fungal, bacterial, or pest pressure. So that's why I'm thinking it might be a nutritional thing, which is why if I was trying to solve this, I would be moving it to a new setup and playing around with the nutrients. The only reason I haven't really is because this has been consistent since it shot new growth from a new growth point lower down on the plant. And that opens up the possibility for some other sort of type of growth habit from that particular node. Same way you can have a variegated plant. Sometimes a node will shoot something different from the rest of the plant. I'm not saying that's what this is. It would definitely need to be experimented with. You would need to cut from this new growth and see if it's potentially stable or how that impacts the plant and what new growth comes of it before you'd ever want to say or claim any sort of mutated plant. And if you're ever selling like a mutated plant, really make sure it's actually mutated. So you have to do things like cut. You want to change the humidity, the temperature, you want to change what it's being fed. And again, you got to prove the stability, because this really could just be some sort of stress response, which is what I'm guessing it is. Yeah, especially flat sinus. So just be careful out there buying plants that haven't been rigorously proven that whatever mutation you're buying is stable within the plant. Here we've got a little bit of a struggling Debilis. The reason this one's struggling is it was propped. This plant tends to be a little bit more sensitive to things like that in my experience. So what I'm going to do to make sure it comes back in a good shape is keep it in a very consistently moist, humid environment, like a bin. All Debilis really need that, but especially when they're like this, sometimes all you can do is monitor to make sure there's healthy roots and let the plant recover and bounce back. That's also what I ended up doing here with this Splendidum. It started off with, much bigger leaves, but because it lost the root system, as the plant recovered, it grew the leaves that could be supported by the roots it had. So it's going to go back in size, but since it's growing again, nice and firm in the pot, and I can see healthy roots, I know this is something that should be left alone and allowed to recover at its own rate. We've got another Splendidum. You can see the yellowing taking place on this newest leaf, and you don't see it on the older leaves. That is always a warning sign. However, the reason it's doing that is because I separated it from the chonk, therefore we have an explanation for what is a sign of stress. Splendidum also just are always stressed. They don't want to be in our homes, they want to be on the riverbanks in a rainforest. But by adapting our care, we can keep them alive. So yeah, I always like to watch my plants for stress responses, and if I can't clearly identify what the issue is, then I know I have something going on. Since we're here, I may as well show off the Debilis. Here's my mother plant. Pretty, pretty, pretty. I do love the Debilis. It makes such pretty hybrids, and it itself is just such a nice plant. Yeah, look at that. Beautiful texture and color. Not the most immaculate leaves. There's clearly some ringing, but I think this might be as good as I'm able to get this plant in particular. Gosh, and this one is like the rehab to end all rehabs. Oh god, its most recent leaf doesn't look happy. This is my SP purple. Okay, I think maybe it's time to grow it without the dome. Only reason I'm saying that is I'm seeing some damage on the new leaf that I sometimes associate with a little bit of too much humidity. The roots look healthy, but I think it might be time. Yeah, I think it's time to grow this guy just exposed in the bin and hope it survives. I think edema was the word I was looking for earlier, and that's what I meant by signs of too much humidity. I'm just seeing some edema on the leaf. The roots look really healthy. I'm not like very worried. My guess would be it's just going to result in cosmetic damage on the leaf. Okay, here we've got a Cunea lens. See the leaf before, and we have this leaf right here. So you can see there's clearly something going on with this plant. A very normal looking leaf to a stressed looking leaf. You can see it's way overly rooted, like way over rooted. The plant is super duper past the point where it should have been repotted out of here. So getting some stressed out leaves. Solution to this would be giving it a repot into a much larger pot so that I can take advantage of this huge root mass, and that would definitely solve this issue. Division of the same plant, much more appropriately sized for this pot, and you can see normal growth. Just show you this guy. This is a Forgetii BVEP. This is one of the, I think, leafless mids I took. Bounced back nicely. Okay, I think that about covers all of the plants that I'm currently struggling with. I know there's a little bit of an impromptu emergency plant care with the Voodoo. I will hopefully deal with that and update via photos right now. Just a few days later once I'm done the cleaning process and get it potted back up. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you could like, comment, subscribe, that'd be really great. Otherwise, have a really good rest of your day.